You may have heard it said in a sermon or a seminar, as I've heard it said so many times before, that the church is the only organisation which exists for the sake of its non-members. We exist not for ourselves, but to serve others. That is such nonsense, because to say that ignores the Rural Fire Service and the SES and Meals on Wheels and St John Ambulance and Surf Life Saving Australia and so many organisations where people don't belong for them just for their own benefits by being a member of that club. No, they exist so they can be volunteers to serve others. Think even right now about Médecins Sans Frontières and Red Cross, Red Crescent and UNICEF, who are there in Gaza, certainly not for their own sake or their own benefit. Far from it, they're risking their own safety to be at the service of those who are in the direst need right now. So no, we as a church are not the only organisation that exists for non-members, but we are one of them. We do exist, not for ourselves, but for others. Because as we hear in the gospel today, Jesus asked to name the most important commandment, he actually names two co-equal commandments, and one of them is to love our neighbour. And we as a church, we love our neighbour by serving those who are not yet with us. And we also do it by telling the world the good news of Jesus, because that is our loving act, to evangelise and want people to know the truth that we know. There is a loving God, and Jesus' death on the cross is there to save us and transform us, that Jesus, through sharing his Spirit, gives us a share in his divine life. This is us loving our neighbour. And we might love our neighbour, perhaps by the organisations within the church, such as St Vincent de Paul Society. In our parish, we have a wonderful prison visitation ministry. We might be catechists, we might take communion the sick. There are many ways of loving our neighbour within the church. But perhaps it might be done in those other organisations too, as so many members of our church are members of those other great organisations like SES and other things. And it's our relationship with Jesus, and it's our being filled with the Spirit and our belonging to the church that motivates us to join and be part of those other organisations through which we love our neighbours. Or we might do it, as so many people as I look around our church also do, not through any organisation or any organised way, but in the simple acts of loving kindness to our quite literal neighbours, those who live around us and are close to us. Bishop Bede Heather was Bishop of Parramatta Diocese for about a dozen years, and he did many good things there. But when he retired up to a small, very modest little retirement village on the Central Coast, where he took great delight in being able to take the old lady across the road shopping and the disabled man next door to his medical appointments. The things that he wasn't never able to do when he was bishop running a diocese, but loved being able to do those humble acts of loving service. And I know around our church there are so many people who do those things and so much more besides. We are members of the church so that we can love our neighbour, one of the two co-equal commands Jesus gives. And I might be preaching to the choir by saying this at our church on the weekend or to you watching this video, but it's really important for us to notice that Jesus doesn't reduce these two commandments into one. Jesus doesn't say, love your neighbour, and by doing that, you'll be loving God, and so that's enough. No, Jesus keeps a distinct category of love for God as something we have to do quite separately to the way in which we love our neighbour, even though the two are linked. And it's important to say that because, again, although we who are in church probably intuitively know this, there are many parts of our church today where the focus is entirely on loving neighbour, often to the exclusion of loving God in the way that I'll mention in a moment. We see these people in our Catholic schools, in our Catholic welfare agencies, people who are dedicated servants who truly act out of love for their neighbour because this is what Jesus asks. But what they're missing, though, is the love for God, which is expressed in prayer and worship. That to love God means taking time out to be with God, to be alone with him in prayer, and to be together with others who love God in worship, which is what we do when we come together as a community at Mass every weekend. And for us who are probably watching this video or at Mass on the weekend, for we who express a personal love for God, the challenge is for us to make sure we follow through with love for neighbour. But there really is no dichotomy. People often say, oh, should I spend more time in prayer or should I spend more time in service? That's really the problem, because those who pray more tend to serve more as well. As I look around our church, I see so many people who are such dedicated servants. The challenge is not, or the competition is not between praying and serving. It's usually between praying and serving, or spending more time sleeping in, or watching something on a screen for myself, or doing something for myself. It's really about, am I focused on myself versus am I focused on God and others? That's usually the big challenge. So for us, let's hold on to the two things Jesus asks of us, to love God and love our neighbor. These two great co-equal commandments, which when we do them both, form the synthesis of a Christian life, which allows us to be exactly like Jesus and as Jesus calls us to be.